Imagine buying a brand new car, right? You open the door, you take a deep breath of that pristine new car smell, and you settle into the driver's seat.
Best feeling in the world.
Exactly. But then you reach up to adjust the rearview mirror, and right there, staring back at you, is an infrared camera, and it is pointed directly at your face.
Which is wild because for over a century, the inside of a car has been this deeply private, almost, sacred space.
Yeah.
We sing off key, we talk to ourselves, we decompress after work. And introducing a persistent staring lens into the cabin, well, it shatters that illusion of privacy instantly.
It really does.
Yeah.
And as of July 7th, 2026, that lens is no longer just some creepy add-on for luxury vehicles.
That's everywhere now.
Every single newly registered car and van sold in the European Union is legally required to have an interior-facing system actively monitoring the driver.
There's a massive shift.
A huge, sweeping mandate. It fundamentally changes what it means to sit behind the wheel. So our mission for this deep dive into the source material is to explore the actual technology tracking your eye movements, the intense privacy battle playing out behind closed doors, and the cybersecurity countermeasures being deployed right now to ensure these vehicles aren't secretly spying on us.
There's a lot of ground to cover.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. Why is the EU doing this in the first place?
So the mandate actually stems from an initiative called Vision Zero.
Okay.
The European Union set this incredibly ambitious target to completely eliminate road fatalities by the year 2050.
Wow, 0 fatalities.
Right. And when regulators analyzed the root causes of fatal accidents, the data pointed overwhelmingly to human error, specifically, distraction and physiological fatigue.
Makes sense.
The logic they use is that you cannot engineer safer crumple zones or better airbags if the driver's unconscious or like staring at their lap at 60 miles an hour. So they decided to tackle the human element directly.
Looking through our sources, it's interesting because the legislation doesn't actually dictate the specific hardware, right?
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
It just says the car must have the functionality to monitor the driver. But the industry consensus has really settled on these infrared cabin-facing cameras, usually tucked into the steering column or manted up by the rear view mirror.
Yeah, that's the standard now.
I'm assuming they chose infrared rather than a standard optical camera because, well, it has to work in the dark.
Darkness is a primary factor.
Yeah.
But infrared also penetrates sunglasses.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, an infrared emitter floods the cabin with light that is completely invisible to the human eye. So the camera sensor reads the reflection of that light, allowing it to map facial features regardless of shadows, or blinding sunlight glaring through the windshield, or even a heavy tint on the driver's glasses.
Which naturally brings us to the functionality, because if this infrared sensor is constantly mapping my face, what is it actually analyzing? The legislation breaks this down into 2 distinct watchdogs. The first is ADDW, or Advanced Driver Distraction Warning. And based on the sources, this system doesn't just look for general movement.
No, it is way more advanced than that.
It actively calculates the physical geometry of your face in 3-dimensional space, right?
Exactly. The software algorithms analyze specific vectors. They measure the distance between your pupils, the angle of your nose, and the tilt of your head to calculate your exact gaze direction.
That is incredibly precise.
It has to be. The system wants to know if your visual attention is directed through the windshield, down toward a smartphone in your lap, or, over toward the center console.
And the sources provide the exact mathematical thresholds for this, and honestly, it is far more rigid than I expected.
They do not mess around.
No, they don't. If you are driving over 20 kilometers per hour and your calculated gaze leaves the road for more than 6 seconds, the system triggers an alert.
Which, 6 seconds at lower speeds is substantial. A lot can happen in a school zone or a residential neighborhood in that window of time.
Yeah, but the window tightens aggressively as you speed up. If you exceed 50 kilometers per hour, you only get 3.5 seconds.
Just 3.5 seconds.
If your eyes are off the road for 3.5 seconds, the car intervenes. It flashes a warning on the dashboard, blasts an audio chime, or literally physically vibrates the steering wheel.
Well, the physics dictate that urgency, right? At highway speeds, in 3.5 seconds, a vehicle covers the length of a football field.
That's terrifying to think about.
Navigating that distance entirely blind is a statistical gamble regulators are just no longer willing to tolerate.
I understand the physics totally, but I have to push back on the reality of driving a modern car here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about the interior design trends of the last decade. Automakers have systematically removed tactile, physical buttons for things like The radio, the windshield wipers, the climate control.
Oh, absolutely.
And they replace them with these massive, complex touchscreens in the center console. It easily takes more than 3.5 seconds to navigate a submenu on a giant iPad just to turn on the defroster.
You're not wrong.
So the law is effectively penalizing the driver for looking at the very screen the automaker forces them to use.
That is a massive friction point. And automotive reviewers in Europe are already calling these systems incredibly aggressive, alarming drivers who are literally just trying to adjust the air conditioning.
I can imagine how annoying that would be.
Regulators and interior designers are essentially fighting a turf war inside the dashboard right now. The regulators are demanding eyes on the road, while the designers have built these interfaces that demand visual attention.
So what gives?
We are likely going to see a forced return to physical buttons simply because touchscreens trigger the ADDW system way too frequently.
I honestly wouldn't mind having real buttons back.
A lot of people would. But what's fascinating here is how the second system operates. Because active distraction, where you are choosing to look, is only half the equation.
Right. The other half is DDAW, the driver drowsiness and attention warning system. Instead of tracking distraction, this one monitors physiological fatigue. It's hunting for those microscopic signs of exhaustion that creep up on you during a long, monotonous highway drive.
So while the ADDW is looking at the angle of your head, the DDAW is zooming in on your eyelids.
Wow.
It tracks your blinking patterns, specifically measuring the duration of your eye closures down to the millisecond. It also analyzes the geometry of your mouth to detect yawning.
Down to the millisecond. That's intense.
The ultimate goal is to intervene before the driver experiences a microsleep.
And a microsleep is a terrifying biological glitch. The brain essentially shuts down for a fraction of a second without the person even realizing it.
Right. You have no idea it happened.
You nod off, snap awake, and suddenly realize you have absolutely no memory of driving the last quarter mile.
By the time a microsleep happens, the danger is already critical. So the DDAW algorithm uses baseline data, basically how you blink when you first start the car, and constantly compares it to your current state.
So it knows what your normal blink looks like?
Exactly. As fatigue sets in, the muscles around your eyes get sluggish. Blinks take slightly longer to complete.
Oh, that makes sense.
By identifying that specific temporal pattern of, sluggish eyelids and extended jaw stretches, the car can jolt you awake and advise you to pull over long before the brain actually forces a microsleep.
Okay, so we have an infrared camera actively tracking the exact millisecond duration of my blinks and mapping the 3D vectors of my face.
Yep.
The creep factor here is off the charts.
It is high.
If a machine is constantly generating high-fidelity biometric data about my physical state, the immediate question is, where is that data going? Who has access to the footage of me driving to the grocery store?
Privacy advocates raised the exact same alarm, which forced the EU to bake incredibly stringent privacy guardrails directly into the text of the General Safety Regulation.
Okay, what kind of guardrails?
They legally mandate the use of a closed-loop system.
Walk us through the architecture of a closed loop. I'm assuming this means the camera is, physically isolated from the rest of the car's network.
Yes. It relies on a localized electronic control unit, or ECU.
Yeah.
An ECU is essentially a dedicated mini-computer on the vehicle's motherboard. In a closed-loop system, the raw visual feed from the camera travels down a dedicated wire straight into this specific ECU.
So it's not going anywhere else?
Right. The processor calculates the geometry, determines if an alert is needed, and then flushes the data.
It just dumps the memory entirely.
Totally. It uses volatile memory, similar to the RAM in a laptop. The visual data exists in a temporary electrical state, just long enough to run the mathematical equation.
And then it's gone.
Once the math is done, those memory sectors are instantly overwritten by the next frame of video. The hardware physically lacks a hard drive to save video files.
Okay, so that answers the local storage question. But cars today have 5G modems. They stream music, they update their navigation maps. The law must address the transmission of this data, right?
Oh, absolutely. The law strictly prohibits the vehicle from transmitting any driver monitoring data to the cloud, to the vehicle manufacturer, or to law enforcement.
That's a relief.
Furthermore, it explicitly bans the use of biometric facial recognition.
Meaning it calculates the geometry, but it doesn't match that geometry against a database to figure out who is driving.
Correct.
It knows a human is fatigued, but it doesn't know if the human is me, my spouse, or a valet driver.
Exactly. It operates purely on mathematical vectors, completely divorced from personal identity.
even with those protections, some people will simply hate the idea of a lens pointing at them.
Oh, without a doubt.
If I'm driving down a beautiful coastal highway and I want to look out the side window at the ocean without the steering wheel aggressively vibrating in my hands, can I dig into the settings menu and just shut this watchdog down?
You can, yeah. You can temporarily disable the active warnings or mute the audio chimes through the vehicle's settings menu.
But I'm guessing the regulators didn't leave a permanent loophole?
They did not. The legislation requires the system to automatically rearm every single time the ignition is cycled.
Of course.
You can turn it off for your Sunday drive, but the moment you turn off the engine and start it back up again, the camera wakes up, the closed loop initiates, and the monitoring resumes.
So what does this all mean? The legal text of the mandate explicitly bans spying. On paper, the system is an isolated amnesiac calculator that forgets everything it sees.
On paper, yes.
But trusting the text of a law and trusting a highly sophisticated internet-connected machine, those are two very different things.
And that tension is the central conflict in automotive cybersecurity right now. And it is heavily influenced by the current geopolitical landscape.
How so?
Well, the European auto market is currently experiencing a massive influx of highly advanced, aggressively priced electric vehicles manufactured internationally, particularly in China.
Which brings up an intense global debate about data security. We are seeing immense scrutiny regarding international tech infrastructure.
Right.
The fear is that foreign governments could theoretically compel these manufacturers to siphon data from the vehicles. So if a car has a cellular modem built into the dashboard, how do European regulators actually verify that the camera isn't secretly using that modem to send a live feed of the cabin to an overseas server?
Regulators do not operate on the honor system.
I would hope not.
And a manufacturer cannot simply check a box claiming their system is a closed loop. Every single vehicle model, regardless of where it is manufactured, must survive a rigorous verification gauntlet before it's allowed on European roads.
Okay, what does this gauntlet look like?
It is built on three primary lines of defense. The first is the type approval process.
Type approval is the legal gatekeeper, right? Automakers can't self-certify. They have to hand their vehicles over to independent, government-sanctioned technical services.
Exactly.
These are massive testing organizations, like TÜV in Germany or UTAC in France. I assume they aren't just looking at the manufacturer's blueprints. They actually have to stress test the hardware to ensure the camera is physically walled off from the modem.
They conduct exhaustive physical and digital audits. The engineers at these facilities tear down the dashboard and map the circuit boards.
Like a full teardown.
A full teardown. They trace the physical wiring from the camera to the ECU to verify that it is air-gapped from the telematics unit. They also stress test the digital architecture to ensure there is no hidden software bridge that allows the safety ECU to pass data to the outbound cellular modem. Only if the vehicle proves it is a true closed loop does it receive type approval to be sold.
Okay, so that covers the lab testing before a car hits the dealership lot. But once millions of these cars are out in the wild, the environment changes.
It does.
And that brings us to the second line of defense: physical teardowns and cybersecurity white hats.
The independent security community acts as this massive decentralized watchdog. Security researchers, competitive intelligence firms, academic institutions. They regularly purchase new vehicles and perform complete teardowns.
Just on their own.
On their own. They physically extract the chips to see if the production hardware actually matches the blueprint submitted for type approval.
Smart.
But more importantly, they monitor the live data streams using network sniffing.
Network sniffing is a fascinating concept. The best way to visualize it is to imagine a digital postmaster monitoring the mail leaving a building. An internet-connected car has an eSIM card constantly sending little packets of data out to the cellular network. Security analysts hook the car up to a packet sniffer, which acts like that postmaster, watching every single piece of data leaving the vehicle.
And the brilliance of network sniffing is that the postmaster doesn't even need to open the envelope to know if something is suspicious.
Yeah.
They just have to look at the shipping label and the weight of the package.
Right, because data has mass, so to speak. A telemetry ping telling the manufacturer, the brakes are functioning normally, that's a tiny text file, maybe a few kilobytes.
Barely anything.
But a biometric 3D face map or a live video feed requires megabytes of data per second. You cannot hide a watermelon inside a standard envelope.
Great analogy.
If the postmaster suddenly sees massive, heavy packets of data flying out of the car's modem to an unrecognized IP address overseas, the alarm bells ring instantly. The automaker is caught red-handed.
It becomes mathematically obvious that the car is transmitting high-density data that violates the closed-loop mandate.
Which begs the question, what actual teeth does the EU have to punish them? I mean, a sternly worded letter isn't going to stop a massive multinational corporation.
Oh, they have teeth.
Yeah.
The third line of defense is the hammer, and the hammer is GDPR, the EU's overarching data privacy law.
Ah, GDPR.
The financial consequences for violating GDPR are deliberately catastrophic. Regulators can fine an automaker up to 4% of their global annual turnover.
4% of global revenue for a company like Volkswagen or BYD equates to billions of euros.
Billions.
Yeah.
And the punishment extends beyond just fines.
What else can they do?
If a manufacturer is caught bypassing the closed-loop system, the EU has the authority to immediately revoke the vehicle's type approval.
Wait, meaning they can't sell it anymore?
They can effectively ban all future sales of that model and force the automaker to physically recall and remove their entire existing fleet from European roads.
That is wild.
It is a nuclear option designed to make the risk of spying financially ruinous.
Okay, so we have independent hardware audits before the car is sold, decentralized white hat hackers weighing the data packets on the road, and the threat of multi-billion euro fines and fleet bans.
Sounds pretty solid, right?
On paper, that sounds incredibly secure. But reading through the sources, privacy experts and cybersecurity analysts remain deeply anxious. What is the weak link in this armor?
The vulnerability lies in what the industry calls the smartphone on wheels paradigm.
Okay.
The hardware might be isolated today, but modern cars are entirely governed by software. And the anxiety stems from a historical lack of trust.
Because automakers don't have the best track record.
They don't. They have a documented history of harvesting non-biometric telemetry data, things like hard braking events, rapid acceleration, average highway speeds, and monetizing it by sharing it with data brokers and insurance companies.
Which directly impacts consumer insurance premiums based on a profile the car secretly built. If they are willing to monetize braking data, the fear is they will inevitably try to monetize driver attention data. But if the hardware is physically air-gapped, how could they even get to it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate loophole is over-the-air software updates, or OTA updates.
Ah, of course.
A vehicle might go through the rigorous type approval process on a Monday. It passes perfectly. It is a completely closed loop. But on Tuesday night, while the car is parked in your driveway, the manufacturer pushes a massive software update over the internet to the vehicle's central computer.
Meaning the Tuesday update could rewrite the rules governing the Monday hardware.
Yes.
Even if the safety ECU is separated from the infotainment ECU, they still have to connect to the vehicle's central gateway to receive those patches. So if the architecture relies on virtual separation, like software firewalls, rather than physical air gaps, an OTA update could theoretically build a bridge between the camera's memory and the outbound modem.
Precisely the fear. European regulators can audit the blueprint of a car once, but they do not have the resources to audit every single line of proprietary code in every single patch that a manufacturer pushes out over the lifespan of a vehicle.
The postmaster cannot effectively weigh the mail if the mailroom rules change every week.
Exactly.
So how is the EU trying to plug that specific OTA loophole?
Policymakers are currently pushing to implement continuous cybersecurity certifications.
Okay, how does that work?
Rather than a one-time approval, they want to mandate ongoing third-party inspections of the actual update pipelines, specifically targeting connected vehicles from third-party nations. The goal is to force manufacturers to prove that every subsequent patch maintains the integrity of the closed loop before it is ever beamed to the car.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You are living through a historic transition in automotive history. For over a century, the act of driving was purely mechanical, right?
Oh yeah, it was about pistons, steering racks, and the physical road.
But this 2026 mandate permanently intertwines the physical act of driving with the digital realities of biometric privacy and international cybersecurity.
The cabin of your vehicle is no longer a private refuge. It is an active node on the digital landscape.
Yeah.
And while the legal guardrails protecting your data today are formidable, the reality of a smartphone on wheels means that consumer vigilance cannot afford to take a day off. Every software update introduces a new variable into the equation.
And as the algorithms tracking our exact physical state become more sophisticated, it raises massive questions about the future of liability.
It leads to a highly provocative thought regarding the trajectory of this entire industry.
What's that?
Well, we know the current law strictly prohibits the sharing of this camera data, but we also know the historical playbook of insurance brokers hungry for telemetry.
Right.
As these interior cameras become standard, and as their ability to calculate the perfect mathematical geometry of distraction becomes flawless, how long until the insurance lobby demands access to it?
Oh, wow.
Imagine a near future where, following a collision, your insurance provider refuses to pay out until they pull the logs from your local ECU just to prove that your head was tilted toward your smartphone 3.5 seconds before impact.
That would change everything.
If those logs are ever weaponized for liability, it fundamentally rewrites the concept of fault on the road forever.
That is a chilling thought, and a perfect place to wrap up our analysis for today. The next time you settle into the driver's seat and catch the reflection of that infrared lens in your rearview mirror, remember that the car is keeping a very close eye on you to keep you safe. But it is entirely up to us to keep an eye on the car. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay curious, keep questioning the technology hidden in plain sight, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.